There we go. And I am going to say welcome again, Thornton. Nice to see you. And I said earlier that the universe sends us these guests, and it really sort of felt like that a bit with you because it was through a mutual friend that we met, wasn't it? It was a neighbour of mine and an old friend of yours. And it was when I was having lunch with him one day, he just dropped into the conversation that you're an old friend. And I was like, what? Because I've been following your work for quite a while. And I then found out that you have a house not that far from me, just across a valley, and that's where you are now. So, yeah, that all felt very synchronistic. So, welcome, Thornton. I am going to, just before you start, I'm going to read a bit of a formal biography of yours to give people some background about you. So, Dr. Thornton Streeter is the founder of the Centre of Biofield Sciences, now based in Panaji, India, after 18 years at the UNESCO MIT World Peace Centre. Thornton has spent over 25 years investigating the anatomy and physiology of the human biofield, and together with colleagues has developed a subtle energy imaging system, the Biofield Viewer. He has also founded the Energy Medicine Exchange, an online meeting hub for those working within and interested in the field of energy medicine. And Thornton encourages research worldwide that is designed to integrate modern medicine with the traditional understanding from Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine. And all of his work centers around qualities very dear to him: authenticity and compassion. And those are very much qualities of the heart. So, Thornton, I think we are thinking along the same lines. And it is a real pleasure to have you here this evening. Oh, and you're muted. Let's.
I got it. I got it.
There you are.
I think, yeah. Oh, well, how wonderful. Yes. And I get it. You've got a beautiful crowd gathered here, and I honor all of you for sharing this evening with me and our co-hosts. What a wonderful event. My field is and has been kind of very much part of esoteric traditions, but in some senses it's quite taboo in a modern scientific framework. So as a scientist, it's obviously been really challenging, but also really exciting. And the biggest part of my presentation today is to share some images with you that trigger memories and experience so that I can share that knowledge so that, in an hour or so, you've got a pretty up-to-date understanding of certainly where biofield imaging is and what it means to you, and potentially accept my invite to use it yourself. So with that in mind, I think I'm probably going to share my slides. Um, if I just hit that button.
That looks great, Thornton. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, it's an opportunity, especially to share 30 years. You mentioned 25 years of experience, but John Catchpole and I, the developer of the biofield imaging system we call Biofield Viewer, have been really, holding hands for 3 decades now. And I often have said the buck stops here when it comes to interpreting biofield images, because we've got this experience, and it enables us to train people and give them at least the kind of global perspective from our perspective, and then they can go off and enjoy the technology using it with their own parameters. But the theme, I guess, extends into imaging, and that's what we're seeing on the right of the screen here, a biofield image, and to a certain extent, geometry, physics, that is represented by this toroidal shape dynamically moving, because this is a good place to start when we understand what is the human biofield. It's a dynamic toroidal um, system which appears in a graphic a little bit like this. In the same sense, the gentleman is shown undressed from the waist up, and we can see a very symmetrical set of colors and patterns. And he's actually a very healthy fellow. So we'll see in other images what different patterns look like and what they imply. And that's really the aim of this session, as I said. So, um, what do we already know? I mean, I remember very specifically one day being in New York, and it was for a United Nations conference on sustainability. And I went to the Metropolitan Museum after my session, and there were all these fabulous statues and paintings and carvings, and they all were showing the human biofield. And obviously, I got a few years looking at the biofield from a technological perspective. So to suddenly see so many examples of it in plain sight, it was one of those funny moments. And I actually went round the entire museum and counted, what percentage of the art on display has a biofield. And it really made me realize that it's actually something very deeply embedded in our own subconscious. And that links in very well with the interpretation of the images because I believe when people say to me, "What does that mean?" and I give them an explanation, there's also a perspective which is just have a look at your image and see what you think it means. And especially if you've got the opportunity to take, say, a picture every day, and in that sense, you really get a calibration of what your atmosphere looks like rather than just the storm in that moment. Um, but of course, in this case, these are all images of the Buddha and Eastern enlightened masters. But we have the same imagery in the Christian framework where church windows have clearly depicted halos, and in fact, halos are the most commonly depicted aspect of the biofield that we see in Christian art because, in real terms, someone who is very saintly, you can see the light around their heads. I've seen it plenty of times. And of course, obviously, we show it with the biofields to allow everybody to see it and to see it on everybody. Um, but our human energy field, what we, as Liz quite rightly mentioned, we call scientifically the biofield, really is the Technicolor Dreamcoat. The chakras that we speak to in the Ayurvedic tradition, in the Vedic sciences, are also well understood from parables and from yeah, very sophisticated devices, if you like. And I would encourage anyone listening to explore, for example, the seven deadly sins and the seven heavenly virtues. And in that context, if you explore, say, the colors of the seven deadly sins or the seven heavenly virtues and match them with the colors, the traditional colors assigned with the chakras, you'll see that there's a very clear link. And so we can then perhaps understand that in this context, a blocked heart chakra could relate to some kind of dysfunctionality that relates to the deadly sin or the heavenly virtue that relates to that point. So I think everybody has really shallow on-ramps to accessing this information, especially if they have perhaps a religious upbringing that has informed them that, certain things shouldn't be looked at because of magic or such like. But yeah, I would certainly discourage that for sure. Um, so, from a scientific perspective, we have another kind of separation where on one side of the playing field, or yeah, um, of the medical paradigm, we have medicine is represented by Gray's Anatomy. And I'm sure you can clearly see the cover or whatever edition. This is only the second edition, but I guess there's quite a few editions. Um, and if anyone's ever explored Gray's Anatomy, apart from having fabulous diagrams, it's a really fantastic, concise breakdown of the human body and its structure. And on the other side of that, we have this other book called Sacred Mirrors, also written by a fellow called Gray, which has, and I'm going to show you some of the images from his book and I'll point them out, um, a completely different perspective of the human body, which doesn't just end at the physical body as represented by Gray's Anatomy, but allows us to explore perhaps other aspects of the human being, which at the time of Gray's Anatomy's concept, development, um, these weren't available for analysis by devices. We've had microscopes and we've been able to um, investigate the human body with the naked eye. And the biofield requires very sophisticated technology. And obviously, we've had to wait over the last few decades for the components of that technology to be developed, like the computers we're all looking at today. Um, but one of the things that I think I'm allowed to do here is to perhaps trigger you. This image, this tiny image at the bottom of the yin yang, it's a cartouche, isn't it? We see it whenever we um, explore Asian or traditional Oriental medicine because it's the symbol of balance. But the image above reveals its true nature because when we paint it on a wall or on a piece of paper, as we see it below, it's a graffiti. It's an icon. It's revealing itself in its shape, these beautiful curves that go into each other. Because if we explore that in geometrical sense, we realize that we've got our toroid again. And so often we have these various signs in plain sight, but unless we really know what they mean, we might get distracted and think, "Wow, look, dualism, duality, Cartesian," rather than what it's actually delineating, which is, an anthroposophic perspective of balance, the yin yang. I'm very excited by that. So again, I mentioned Alex Gray, and his image is certainly in the middle here. And again, he himself is integrating in the same way Gray's Anatomy integrates the physical body and all of the different systems. He's integrating the acupuncture points, what we call the chakras, and even the sort of minor chakras we can see in the palms and other depictions of the chakras, which have been relied upon for hundreds of years. But of course, now we've entered an era where, as I said, we've got technology which is sophisticated enough to take this data, to take these graphics that perhaps were created by clairvoyant people. Clairvoyance is just clear seeing from the French. And maybe Alex Gray, the artist behind this, was influenced by this process. But what we're talking about today is something that we can see, and it's something that we can measure. And it's very important that everybody understands that we've entered an era where we don't have to rely on drawings. We don't have to rely on pendulums and tea leaves and such like. Of course, practitioners have their own 1,001 ways to assess and measure the hologram. But what I'm speaking to is important because the eye gives us, I think, 80% of what we see is seeing is believing. And when we have the opportunity to see the bioplasma, which is this fourth state of matter, and that's why this fingertip and, dare I say, this crystal are important here as images because they really allow, if you can maybe take a screenshot and zoom in, you can actually see these kind of almost lightning like fronds of bioplasma emanating from the furrows of the fingerprint. And they're actual, you can see they're like each one is a ray. And there are actually certain areas where they seem to be not there. That may be because of the specifics of that individual's fingerprint, but it could also speak to some kind of shielding or where the plasma can't flow out of that particular area. And so when we gather a composite of this kind of data, you'd be surprised how interesting that information can be, especially because it speaks to a predictive aspect, which perhaps the body itself is not declaring, and therefore it's not a diagnosable issue. This is an opportunity for a to prepone diagnosis, as we say in India. And again, talking to the quartz crystal, we can see that it too has very similar fronds of dynamic energy. So we call this bioplasma. And as I said, it forms a composite we call the biofield. But the reason why we can see it in this particular image is because there's a charged plate here. And it's exciting in the same way when you have a neon light and you excite the gases inside that long glass tube and you turn the electricity on, it illuminates. Bioplasma is a bit like that because that's yeah, it's a very good analogy actually. So we're effectively charging up with electricity that emanation to make it visible. And as we mentioned earlier, clairvoyance is a skill set, a higher sensory perception, like several others, which allow us to see it, with the naked eye. But we don't need to really. People get a bit confused by it. Um, Otherwise, we'd all see it right now. It's clear that there's a sense of needing to be prepared for that great excitement. Here is a composite image of these toroids, and in one of them, you can clearly see that figurine of the human body. So we get a sense of the scale and the placement of the body within that very kind of, well, if it was a hurricane, it would be the eye, wouldn't it? The sort of silent, clear, still, present. Seems quite an appropriate place to be as long as one's hurricane is not dangerous or damaging, but just a gentle breeze. So yes, now to the art technology, and especially, I think, really the relationship that we have developed an understanding of the heart. So I think I'm going to focus on that. But here, this is, you know, hundreds of practitioners around the world have our equipment set up in their clinic. And as you can see, there are certain features. There's a white background. In this case, they've got some little interesting rims on there, which has nothing to do with my image, I can assure you, but obviously it's going to be there in everybody's images, and I think it's quite nice. And so in this case, a gentleman is standing there with his shorts, and we can see actually a very, very nice image. The first glance, because this is in chakra mode, which is one of the modes of our software, we can clearly see his brow chakra, his throat chakra. Interestingly, there is some asymmetry at his chest, so perhaps that's why we're not clearly seeing his heart chakra. And there are other patterns which drag very locally his biofield around. Um, this is obviously an image which is being compared to another image, and I can assure you, as it says up here, it's a before and after healing. I don't exactly know what Roots Wellness Centre have done with this fellow, but that's part of the anonymity and the glory of this is that all of your modalities work, and now you can see them working, whatever you do. And the most wonderful thing, of course, is that when someone's having a healing and they can see what you're doing, um, instead of it drifting back out of their field, they get a really strong opportunity to own it. And that's really what we're seeing in this next picture, because we can see his very bright brow chakra, his field around his head has, his halo has become completely white, which is fabulous. Um, the strong pink asymmetry that was seen at his chest has now dissipated and become a more baby, softer, gentle pink, which is less concerning for us as interpreters. So there's definitely lots gone on in his healing, and maybe just one session. And certainly other areas as we go down the body are brighter and clearer. So, wow. Um, this is our way of showing how healing works. We take hundreds of different pictures from all sorts of different angles, but just for that um, image of before and after, and of course, if this gentleman had 10 healing sessions, there could be a little video graphic showing the stage by stage changes as he goes through to optimization when all of this field becomes balanced and harmonized. But it's absolutely exciting. And of course, the more people you see, the more idea you get of what you're seeing. And that's the training process. So, we jump in clinic and you scan your clients. Obviously, I'm speaking to practitioners here, and that then allows us to show you what we think and what we know different patterns mean, and you've got the benefit of knowing the actual person and the clients and what's gone on with them, their medical history. So, what I find is that the transfer of knowledge is very acute in these exact circumstances where you're scanning your own family, your own self, or your own clients. And I get to speak like this on a Zoom. You can record it, whatever you like. And there hopefully is those kind of aha moments which allow us both to understand why what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing, and also why I have very strong urges to tell you what the picture wants me to tell you. I hope that's not too weird. But again, as a slight segue, this is not a medical screening process. This is a high technology scan that allows us to do a reading a bit more like, your palm chart or your astrology chart, because this is outside of the physical body paradigm. Um, most of the discussion is what we obviously can do is, because we're seeing the individual in front of us, we can get to speak to the energy aspects of the different systems of the body, such as respiration or digestion. For example, this fellow looks like he's got some digestion issues, but I can only say that from an energetic perspective. But of course, this is a really interesting marker with someone who's got a very strong feeling about something, and there is no medical diagnosis. There is nothing wrong with him or her. But still, these patterns are emerging in his or her human atmosphere, and it gives us an opportunity to steer them away from disease. And that's a wonderful opportunity, what we call preventative medicine. So that's why thousands of people use our device as a kind of checkup. Families do once a month, and if the pictures are in range, everything's fine. And if something's going awry, they then look into it. And they use gentle techniques to start with. And if it's something serious, obviously they've crossed the border into pain or reason to go see their medical doctor and have a diagnosis. And so we see all of this. And over 30 years, of course, I've seen it as well. So, it's all in there, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to share it. Um, but you must understand our technology is live and it's real time. So you can see healing happening live in real time. And if you're teaching or want to show someone what it looks like, it's a really fantastic and exciting opportunity. So in this case, we're seeing a young lady who's standing there breathing, perhaps a bit like our guide earlier encouraged us, doing some deep breaths. You can actually see her shoulders and chest rising. The healer seems to have her hand kind of on her thymus or touching gently there, and another hand perhaps on her shoulder. Um, we can very clearly see the young lady's third eye sort of pulsing and other chakras, the throat when her hand's not in the way, and the solar plexus is quite visible. So here we are at about 1 minute in, and suddenly I guess the young lady's kind of sealed the um, venting and digested the shielding, and then suddenly she kind of jumps into a kind of another state. Bang, there it is. So, wow, I love that. That's really beautiful. And so she's claiming this sort of higher set of tools by doing that, by accepting that healing. And you can see now her belly, there was a big orange pattern on her belly, and that's all nice and green. Amazing, really. Yeah, every time I watch that. So, imagine yourself, having access to this so you can demonstrate what you do to your clients or show your husband or wife why it's worth, taking on board a more dynamic lifestyle and, dare I say, accept the challenge from all of us that there's something worthy of optimization. And this is it. And this is how to measure it. Because if we go to the gym and end up looking absolutely strapping, if we're, not on the right diet and doing kind of shortcuts, we may look great, but, potentially could drop dead any minute. And that's boring. Why not have a full understanding of our wellness from all perspectives? Because what we're bringing is 5,000 years of Ayurvedic and traditional Oriental medicine to the table, not in terms of the actual techniques, but more their understanding of the human being. And I think that that's just the need of the hour. Um, our technology has lots of different filters, lots of different ways that you can look at somebody or some people. And this is really a very different image. And what it is you can see a healer who's very bright and with catching the edge of their biofield. This is a 3D image, so we're not anywhere near them, we're observing them. Um, Holding the hands up and meeting the hands of someone who's there to attend for some healing. And I think it's a really beautiful contrast because this was taken in the first moments when they kind of connected. And already you can see the man's hands seem to kind of brighten and the front of his body is sort of very slightly glowing. But yeah, this is the images in the Biofield Viewer in 3D. And that again is another way of observing the body from a completely new perspective. And I would encourage everyone who's either got our system already or is thinking of getting it to explore these different filters, if you like. This was the first picture we ever took in 3D, and it clearly shows the meridians. And the meridians are strongly understood in Ayurvedic medicine. We also know them, sorry, they're well understood in Oriental medicine, but we know them as the nadis in Ayurveda. So obviously, it's important to know the sort of anatomy from all the different languages and to not miss out on the opportunity to corroborate. And in the same way, if we look at somebody's knees, or, this is the legs, I hope you can see that what we're looking at is just the legs of someone. When we see it in 3D, the biofield reveals very specific details. And in this case, it's, um, knee pain. But very, specifically the right knee has got the sort of hottest spot of all, and but it drops down in below that. And so a physiotherapist who had this image, or dare I say this technology, this live opportunity, could do various treatments and see in real time what harmonized that area, and especially obviously what cleared it all together. And so that's why we say it's like turning the lights on in the operating theatre for someone who does healing. But yeah, that's really exciting, I think. Okay, so as an institute, we've we've gathered data in all kinds of different ways, and I just mentioned the meridians and showed a rather bizarre image of somebody's hand in 3D. And now I'm going to mention the chakras, which are another anatomical feature of the biofield. But in this case, we've actually got a yogi sitting here, and he's got these hugely sophisticated electrodes. Um, Stuck to his body down the chakra line, if you like. And my colleague here is analyzing the data. And that machine there is like a kind of seismograph. It's a super sensitive device which can pick up the most subtle vibrations and fluctuations. And those sensors are equally sophisticated. It's kind of a one-off machine, but the point is that it creates um, um, a sort of multi-phase graphic of the functionality of each of the chakras. And it even creates a composite, which you can see down there, which, it looks like a pretty graph from here, but it allows us to compare all kinds of different sets of data that we collect and get a much better understanding of how people who have gifts like yogis can activate their energy centers or their chakras instantaneously, and do all kinds of interesting things with them. So it gives us a sense that there's a gymnastics to be revealed. Yoga may be it, but perhaps there's something that emerges from all of these um, perspectives, which gives us a much greater understanding to guide different age groups and how they can keep themselves optimized. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. Um, Now, it obviously helps enormously when a technology obviously has a wide application like we do. There's literally people all over the world using our technology every day. But it's also nice when scientists take time out. In this case, a colleague, Kokila, did her master's and then a doctorate using our technology to really have a fresh look at the chakras. And one of the things and one of the reasons, apart from honoring her with this slide, I wanted to mention is that you can see these pictures are a little bit different. The small ones in the bottom is the sort of normal output of one of our filters. But the other two images have been further processed by a program called ImageJ. Now, ImageJ is the approved software for medical imagery. So if you take a picture of a cell from a slide and you stain it and you want to, super accentuate the image, you can import it into image J, and then if you want to publish your paper, you can then use those image J images or whatever it is. So that's what this is, and I think it's interesting because you can see further details of the different chakras. They're almost like contours when you take some of the detail out. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Um, also, I'm sharing one of the names of our technology. We call it Soul Mirror. I guess that's a bit more self-explanatory. And there is a video on YouTube, which you can go and find, Soul Mirror, how to take biofield images, something like that. And I think I'm going to be able to share a link with you. But this is an opportunity, I think, which allows you to at home, a bit like this fellow here is taking his wife's passport photograph, and she seems to, well, she very cleverly is standing with a white wall behind her, but it seems to be even brilliantly matte. And then she's even got some very simple deflector so that shadow and such like is reduced. That's what we want when you take a biofield image. And of course, now the governments around the world have let people take their own passport photographs with their own phones. Even the government understands that the phone has got the most brilliant camera in it now, and therefore it can be trusted to produce, obviously, a very important image of you. And now we obviously take that image and do all kinds of wonderful things with it, which is just reveal stuff that's available in the image, but that's just not visible. And that's really why our technology works, not just for a still image, but also for a video as well. And you can take a full set of images. There's no reason why you and a friend can't, get down to a white bikini or underwear or shorts or whatever it is and just take a full set of images. But the key issue is the lighting. And that's why I suggested you watch that little video before. And the lighting can't just be your kitchen, unfortunately, because there's so many different lights in there and there's so much power in them all that they're going to make your very delicate biofield impossible to interpret because they're going to cast shadow and light. It's a bit like me sitting here right now, be hopeless biofield image because I've got lights on over there and it's just eh. So if you want to go down this route, please um, do kind of watch that little video. And then, of course, in terms of interpreting the image, you may have a picture like this of yourself. What on earth does it mean? Well, look up face reading. It's 5,000-year-old science that is incredibly well calibrated, and it speaks to the opportunity for someone with experience or on that journey to interpret someone's well-being just from their face. And because our technology super accentuates issues, then we can cross-reference and go, okay, well, there's something appearing kind of on that lady's right eyebrow that's kind of sticking out, and then on her lips, liver's coming up, and so is that information? Is that something that you can relate to? If you then explore face reading deeper and the whole science of it, and it's all widely available. So that's why we're comfortable with encouraging people to have access to taking their pictures. Before, you had to do it with a professional practitioner. But now we feel there's so much knowledge hiding in plain sight, and it's free and it's accurate and it allows us to be our own kind of witness. I mean, obviously, this is not a diagnostic technology. You go to other people for that. But if you want to witness your healing journey and experience stage by stage what your biofield looks like, this is all you need. Your phone, a little roundy cat light thing, and a selfie grasper, and you're away. That's me. You're away. Yeah. Okay, and so how do you access all of that? Well, my invitation here is, and by all means share this, is, I'm sure you've come across this website before, Patreon. I'm sure there's lots of different ways of saying that word as well. But if you go to Soul Mirror, you can join up, and then there are different options, which I would encourage you to explore. But when I was thinking earlier, if you email me, I will send you free access for a month or so. So bear that in mind, and I better give you my email address later, or at least Liz will. Now, I think I've touched on the science of my subject a little bit. I've placed it in the context of integrative healthcare, and I've spoken the language that we speak when we're interpreting images. But I'd like to take it a stage further now and sort of declare with this slide that I'm sort of dropping into a slightly different mode here, which is a little bit more conceptual, but it's my concept of what what we've learned and what I personally have been able to appreciate and learn from working with this technology over the 30 years. And it may be wrong, but it feels very juicy and it feels very right and it grows as well. And all it is a perspective. It's just a tool for understanding, a bit like a guidebook is, or a little instructions leaflet, yeah. Or dare I say, a ruler, just a way of measuring something. So here we go. Um, when I speak about the chakras that we see when we are in chakra viewer mode, using our Biofield Viewer imaging system, we have a real sense of a vortex. I coined the phrase tornado alley to describe the chakras once. But in the same way that a bush needs something, it creates flowers because it needs to be pollinated. And so it creates this delicious opportunity for that process to occur. We also open our flowers, and it's a very sophisticated process. And it's probably not a bad moment to speak to why. Um, the physical body has got a really good system of elimination. We put food in our mouths, we love it, we absorb it, we digest it, and then out it comes the other end. That's the sort of physical waste. And it relates to this one-dimensional earth element. In the same way, and I'm going to carry on with this analogy, even though I'm not going to move my slides. In the same way, we drink water and we sweat and we cry and we pee. And so we've got clearly a number of different ways to eliminate solids and liquids. But, when we go higher into the states of matter and we think about perhaps fire element, um, we get hot, our ears swell up, we get goosebumps, our skin, elephants' ears kind of go out like radiators. Um, so we do have a way of kind of controlling our temperature, through our skin, obviously in a number of different ways. Um, in the same way we fart and we belch and all kinds of things can be emanated. But when it comes to plasma, that very, the state of matter that we're not taught about in school anymore, we have a complete set of equipment. The urethra and the bathroom is no place. This plasma is really fiery, as you've seen. And so we eliminate it through all these tiny little openings in the skin, which are called the acupuncture points or the marma points. And that all comes to a head um, at what we call the chakras or the energy centers, so that we're actually emanating a huge amount of bioplasma, like I said, when we need to. through each of the different chakras because each one deals with a different dimension of a different state, and that's really where we come to here with this slide. But I'm going to use another analogy, if you don't mind, and so it's birth. So imagine, please, why not be a child being born? Why not imagine that, right? And your head is just emerging from the mother, your fabulous mother. Um, and you see everybody like as and the first thing you do is like you take your first breath like this. And from a kind of quantum physics perspective, we could say that in that moment you're emerging from the 0 point. And so what I'm suggesting right here, right now, is that the base chakra, which perhaps many of us know is the bottom of the body and deals with the legs and grounding, such like fight, freeze, or fawn, I heard. Um, and these, of course, are functions of the leg. You run with your legs and you freeze solid. That's happens to the legs too. So you're kind of running to the game or you're running away from the attacker, whatever it is. But I'm suggesting, and please don't be lost. Please don't mind being lost because I'm dropping a multitude of concepts on your head right now, and you're just being born having your first breath. Okay, so I accept that. Right. So my next slide speaks to two dimension, doesn't it? This is the second dimension. And what I'm suggesting here is that as we take our first breath, now that's the point just above the pencil. We've just emerged from the 0 point. As we take this first breath, we look at the mother, maybe the brother, maybe the other, the midwife, the doctor, whoever's in the room. And that is represented by all these lines emerging from that center. And that's what two-dimensionality is. And it's interesting that when we speak to biofield interpretation, or even when we speak to holistic wellness, that second chakra, that second dimensionality is all about the family. It is all, digestion is, how's your mum? There's such a strong connection between these two things that in the same way that you can seamlessly overlap the seven deadly sins and the seven heavenly virtues with the colors of the chakras, you can also do that with this presentation. And so, what am I doing here? I am speaking to now one, two, and now here the third dimension. Very simple series of slides. As you recall, earth, water, fire, and now we're at the solar plexus. This is now the material world, the emerging world, the potential world was there before. Flight, fight, freeze. Anger is related to the base chakra. So what I'm proposing is that the three base, second, and third chakra represent what we, all of us, understand as space. Okay. So when I say space, I mean, I'm sitting in this room right now. You guys all are too. That's the space that I'm talking about, the space that we're all sitting in. Um, and the lower three chakras allow our human being body to experience, and dare I say, manifest in this space by doing what they do. Let me give you an example. We're sitting on a ball that is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, and yet we feel still. That stillness comes from those three chakras spinning at certain speeds, a bit like the plasma jets on a space station, so it doesn't spin out of control. They fire So we feel still in this space so that I can talk to you and we're not going, what? What? It's too windy. Um, it's very important. It's very fundamental. But space on its own is frozen. It's totally frozen because without time and without a progression of nows, space is limited. We're human beings, we're dynamic creatures, and so we have three spinning chakras which deal with space, and one very, very, very important chakra, which we call the heart chakra, which allows us to synchronize with what we call time. So that the lower four chakras now allow us to operate in space and time. It's very basic, but we don't learn this in school. So I've got to share it with you like this. But it makes sense because um, when the Greeks first started measuring our heartbeat a couple of thousand years ago, it was 60 beats a minute. And although we all seem to be in a rush now, there is a sense that the heartbeat is like a body clock. Boom, boom, boom. And we say people live in different times. You know, we all have this experience of oneness or our reality, but who knows? It could be that because I've lived for 58 years, my understanding of time each year is less for me with 58 of them to rack up than my son at 22 or the baby over there. So I think we can look at time in a slightly different way when we unlock it from the Cartesian clock version of it, which is fabulously useful for tracking planets. Of course, you do have to keep changing the thing because it's not that brilliant at it. But the more snazzy your watches are, apparently, they can actually do all kinds of wonderful things. And God bless little parts of machines that have kept us busy making them for so long. Um, but this slide is actually very important because it's got an analogy that I also want to share with you in it. And the analogy is what all these people are doing right here. So imagine you're one of those fabulous people in the front, and the board that you're riding is your body, right? Oh, what do I mean by that? So the physical body and the lower three chakras allow us to experience space, and therefore we have to have a body to do that. Um, but the board is now a vehicle. It's not just me standing, running fast, slow, running backwards, swimming, whatever it is. I'm now on this board. And so for this perfect analogy, I need you to be on this board because time is like a wave. And you can see all these fellows are not riding a wave, a normal beach wave that crashes on the shore. This is a most beautiful wave that runs down the river, and if you catch it, it's presence. It's real presence because shit, you can fall off your board. It seems you can get back on one of those ones further back, one of those waves. You can tip forward on your board and not be present. If you're dragging anchors in the past, you can't be present. So again, the surfer on their board is a really good analogy for allowing what the heart chakra needs you to be and needs you to do in order to have access to everything else. And I'm going to share with you what I mean by everything else. Because here we are at the fourth dimension and at the heart chakra. And I'm sure many of you know that we have more chakras than four. But many people you'll find are actually only dynamically and actively using these lower four. In fact, a telltale sign of that is if someone's wearing a tie because that's a sort of shield for all of the chakras. So they're really subconsciously unaware of their functionality and much rather shield and hide their presentation. Yeah, it's like a shield, the old tie. But anyway, I think it's beautiful to be here because here is where the heart is. What I've described is the cosmic nature of a human being spun by three, now four vortices, tornadoes in our alley, in that eye of the hurricane. And in order to access the higher sensory perception, the sports gearbox that I call it, we need to be present. We need to be standing on that board. If you're not standing on the board, because as I said, you're dwelling in the past or you're worrying about the future, if you're not present on that board, your biofield doesn't, your gearbox only does first, second, third gear. Sorry, mate. But if you're prepared to explore presence, and that's why our ceremony earlier was such an extraordinary gift, because that's what you do to shake off the day and return to presence. It's all about the breath and synchronization and awareness. And I'm thrilled about that. I'm thrilled that all these things are all so simple that, we can monitor our health with our phone. That's simple. We can use very wonderful guidance from millions of different perspectives that we call holistic healthcare, healing, whatever. And we can track the progress of our individual choices and our practitioners and whether that session worked as well as we thought it did. Okay, so what do I mean by higher sensory perception? And what do I mean by most people are sort of stuck in just these lower dimensions? Well, let's see. So there's our surfers all riding that bore. It's called a bore, this wave. They're riding a wave down the river of consciousness. It's not crashing on the beach, this wave. It's their own river of consciousness. And so if there's an alignment with the heart, especially the heart, then we get to do all these other wonderful things that people like Harry Potter were up to. So once we get beyond time and space, we're still a human being, aren't we? That's wonderful. So we have this triage, if you like, with the throat chakra, the brow chakra, and the crown chakra. And these things, these three are all activated when a healer is doing their thing. So when people say, what do healers do? I'm telling you, this is what they do. They all activate the crown because the energy's coming in at the top of that toroid. That's the source of the energy they need. Otherwise, they're done. One healing session, they're going to drain their own batteries. So I can assure you, if someone's healing, their crown chakra is wide open, their brow chakra is processing and making everything specific, and then their throat chakra is a communication to kind of broadcast out whatever this specific setup is. And it's beautiful. And it happens beyond time and space. And that's why we say you can visit a healer, say someone like Carl Dawson, who matrix reimprinting. I know there are thousands of practitioners, thousands of modalities, but this just springs to mind because his modality allows you to go back to that trauma when you were 7, when your uncle was beastly or whatever it was. And by witnessing it beyond time and space, you actually kind of go there and you get to really digest all the trauma and the pain in a very beautiful way. And I think surgery is going to be doing a lot more things like that I'm describing. Um, yeah. So here we are at the fifth dimension. So this relates obviously to the throat chakra, and it's interesting. This is the elements ether, and of course, we don't really know what that is in modern speak. Perhaps people who are gamers get cartoony versions of ether. And they know what it is. But I think it's sad that modern science has sort of shut the door to a beautiful integration of real-time stuff, which I would say, if not added, detracts because you may get wrong advice. If you're only seeing the top of an iceberg and you can't see the bottom and you're only talking about the top of icebergs, then you might miss something, mightn't you? It's pretty obvious. So, as we go to the brow chakra, obviously, we're inventing quantum computers nowadays, guys. So come on, you can imagine what these higher dimensions are up to. I'm just explaining that the human body lays on seven of them. The base chakra allows us to ground down like Zebedee on his spring, and balance and harmonize with a planet that's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. And as I might add, charging through space as part of our solar system at God knows what speed. So, there's a toolkit which I jokingly called the sports gearbox, but actually allows us to do such things as, I guess, levitate in this drawing, or astral project, or as I said, revisit a certain time for a healing experience. Um, and of course, I often, when interpreting people's biofield images, I'm looking at their brow chakra and it may be beautifully open and clear, and I get to say wonderful, or it may have some kind of shielding where I challenge them, why are you not listening to your own intuition? Yeah. And obviously, from us, from this perspective, the crown chakra is everything because, like the base, which allows us to connect with this choice planet, the crown allows us to communicate with source. And in my analogy of seven deadly sins and seven heavenly virtues, it's interesting that the crown relates to humility when the aperture is wide open, and pride when the aperture is way closed. So that's quite fascinating because I think you would all agree that humility is one of the most wonderful qualities of a healer or a saintly person, and pride is the opposite. So, I just think playing this game of old maid with different systems that we've come across and seeing how they corroborate is a really good start into this field. It really is. Okay, so I've talked about the sort of journey from um, the first time you walk into a healer's space. But I don't think there's any better calling card than an image like this, which allows us to see, how much the biofield changes after a week of doing something brilliant that brings someone's energy field back on track. And specifically, this image is important because it represents the urban young lady who's almost got a candy floss, we call it, you call it cotton candy floss of pinkness all over her. And it's like the suit, the urban suit, safe space. But it isn't because it's expensive to wear and shield yourself so much. And I think part of it is all the EMFs and weird energies being directed on us. But, if we knew what we could do on a daily basis to maintain our natural biofield state, that, as I said, gives us access to our intuition and our sort of sixth sense and, other things which are worth knowing. Because if you know not to get on that train just because then it's a good place to be, I would suggest, in the urban jungle. Ah, so yes. the father and their child, how glorious. You see the child's energy field is a plus, and the gentle poor fellow's got maybe some old war wounds on his clavicle there, uh, and down his right arm there's something going on. But you know, even he's a wonderful shiny example. But yeah, it's I think it's important also to open the door to understanding that technology like mine um, potentially can allow us to have fresh conversations about subjects which we haven't really been able to talk about before. In this case, we're looking at an image of a boy, but in a mortuary. And our technology is just imaging the wall. The boy himself is actually lying dead on the table on the trolley, in fact, because he was hit by a bicycle. No, he was on his bicycle and he was hit by another vehicle, and unfortunately died. But you know, probably an interesting case because he wasn't expecting to die and probably didn't know, gee, go into the light or whatever. So in this particular instance, we were able to capture him in the room for quite some time. And some people may just be like, wow, that's wonderful. It's nice to know that our soul leaves the body. But I think it's an opportunity to explore all kinds of other things, like, you know, what is psychiatry and what, you know, in so many different traditions, we can do things like exorcism of entities. But what are they? Are they just sort of lost children or people we picked up at the hospital? Yeah, I mean, you know, we need to have all these conversations so that we can have a much better understanding of healthcare. For example, in Ayurvedic medicine, they have 8 specific branches, and one of them specifically deals with what this is effectively a ghost or an entity or a soul. And yeah, I think that's an important conversation for us to have. In the same way, this is not using my imaging technology. This is using something developed in America, and I'm sure you can recognize that it's like a Polaroid. The actual camera used is a Polaroid camera, but they use this torsion generator beside the camera. And in this case, you can see a lady before the torsion generator is switched on the Polaroid picture. I guess she's a, let me guess, 55-year or 60-year-old Caucasian woman. But when we look over to the other picture, we see that she got a new heart from a lady from the South in America who was black. And what's strange is that you can now suddenly see with this technique of biofield imagery, not only the original lady and the heart donor in a kind of hologram form, but there are actually all kinds of other faces as well in there. And what I would suggest is that when you cleave somebody open in a hospital, and you're going in for the sort of, you know, organ transplant, but you haven't really honored all the other aspects of health sciences for a good 100 years, you're going to have things like this show up. And again, this is an opportunity for us to discuss it and explore it and learn and perhaps do it differently. I don't know. But again, you know, I'm happy to unleash our technology on an unsuspecting public for 2 reasons. I trust their higher sensory perception to kind of grasp what they're seeing, and that will develop. But I also trust that there's a huge array of fabulous work that's been done by, as I said, thousands of holistic modalities over the years. And that's accessible. So if you see a pattern on a certain part of your body, you know, you've got an opportunity to go and see what that means. This is the referred pain chart. So if that area on either side of your hips is hot, then, you know, maybe it's something to do with your appendix, you know, and if it shows up in the biofield viewer, then that's what I mean by it's hot. Anyway, that's really what I would say about that. And there's so many of these fabulous guidance systems that relate to all of the chakras. In this case, we can see here the heart. And I'm going to speak again about that a little bit more. But it's interesting that a lot of these charts speak to sadness and grief or sad. You see, they're all saying the same thing. A congruency. Here, look, this is biofield anatomy, sadness and grief. Um, so it allows you to take your biofield image, explore the charts and maps of holistic therapies, and get an idea. If something says over and over and over and over again, then you might explore what that exactly means for you. And these are some interesting pictures that I put together earlier. This is quite a well-known doctor, an American doctor, who uses our imagery to kind of really highlight, the importance of a modern holistic perspective to healthcare, not just having that appointment for a medical checkup. And I'm really excited that there's hundreds of people like him using our technology because seeing is believing, and you can see what's going on. And because any image can be run through a biofield image, you can take your favorite pop singer and see, wow, what an amazing, balanced, harmonized energy field she's got. Um, there's lots of people talking about our field, but it's also hidden. So, I encourage you to go dig. This was a recent book that someone made, exploring all the different techniques that are now available for imaging the biofield or the aura. Yeah, and notice this picture. This is me actually, but just a picture of the biofield seen on a computer screen. But on this side, it's slightly different. It's the biofield again, but instead of seeing the image on a computer screen, we're seeing it projected back onto the body. And so this is a very unique opportunity. You see, this child is lying on a white, it's like a therapist's a massage table. And so this effectively is that operating theatre that I was speaking to, where a healer can work in real time and actually see how the chakras are responding in real time, and obviously record it all, or teach a whole load of students how to do something. So yeah, I think it's very useful. And what I've learned over the years, from 30 years of scanning people, is that originally there'd just be the odd one who showed up with this beautiful white or a symmetrical, bright biofield out of 100, just one. But that number is increased. Every decade I would notice a much higher percentage of people are showing up, what I call on purpose. They've got the memo. They understand the rules of the game of life. That it's fueled by this humility and this sharing and this joy. And in that state, we're just a lot more powerful, just totally optimized. It's beautiful. So perhaps that's where I'll pause for my slides and hand the microphone back to my colleague. I hope my timeline was all right. But anyway, I just went on a fabulous journey. I hope you enjoyed it.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm just going to try and pin myself if I can do that.
Great.
1 second. Thank you so much, Thornton. Wow. Gosh, what a lot of information you have shared for us. Absolutely wonderful.
Well, it's
Um,
kind of night class, wasn't it? I feel like it got dark on us, and I flew here from America yesterday, so I probably look like the professor who's been teaching too many night classes. But thank you anyway. I tried to keep my energy levels up, and I've got a lovely glass of water here, which I didn't have enough sips of.
It was great. Thank you so much. And oh, what a wonderful way to finish your presentation with this really lovely observation that you've made, that more people that you're looking at when you're measuring biofields are showing up with a really bright, balanced biofield. And as you said, people that are perhaps on their path, got their purpose sorted and really maybe connected
Yeah,
spiritually.
it's wonderfully reassuring, Liz,
Yeah,
considering world events. You know, you think
yeah,
the world's
uh,
going backwards, but I go, no. I
yeah,
hang on a minute. I did a group with you. How many people were lovely and bright there? Half of them.
yeah, at least. Yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
you get what I'm saying. It's like
They do.
we're getting it in
Yeah.
spite of, and that's really the message. Absolutely.
That's a wonderful message, and I hope it, reassures people. What about questions? We don't have any in the chat at the moment, I don't think. A few people sadly had to leave a little earlier, but lots of people saying thank you and how amazing. Um, would anyone like to ask Thornton a question? You can type it, or if you want to put your hand up, you can speak to him. As I said to you earlier, Thornton, sometimes when we have full talks like yours, people are a bit, I think, overwhelmed with all the information.
Well, Peter's got his hand
Well,
up.
Peter's got his hand up.
I thought, yeah, thank you. Very, very interesting. I watched the video that you and Liz made before the event. So I'm going to ask a technical question, if that's all right.
Sure.
So you mentioned that obviously your system's proprietary, of course, but you mentioned that you were measuring different frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum. I think you mentioned infrared, ultraviolet, and standard, the
Yeah,
light frequencies.
in the visible spectrum. Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
straddles. Yeah, I mean, we happily say that's what it's doing, but that is kind of lay speak in a way. But yes, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a bit like when you have one of those remote controls for a television. You know, if you point it up and press the buttons, you can't see the light. But
Mm,
if you do that to our system, you see the light go on. It's just it's
mm.
calibrated to spread beyond
Yeah.
the visible spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah, so you see more of the spectrum. I see. And what about the plasma side? I mean, obviously the normal camera won't record that. So,
Well, I think what we're doing is super accentuating the gradations of light intensity in all of the images that we take. So what does
mm,
that mean? That means the biofield viewer is effectively a light meter.
mm,
And so we are measuring the bioplasma, but not from the perspective, as you said, suggest like when you capture a photograph of lightning or such like.
yeah. I mean, is there anything that can capture plasma as an image directly? Or is it
Well, I think film itself catches
themselves?
plasma. I think you just, you need to, I mean, in the case of electrographic imagery, which I'm
Mm,
sure you're familiar with, that was first, well, people accredit it to a fellow called Semyon Kirlian, but
mm, mm,
actually there's electrographic images of the hand's bioplasma going back into the 1890s. So I think there's all kinds of different techniques. I think there's lots of cameras that don't do anything at all,
mm,
and lots of techniques that don't do anything at all. And I think that's quite frustrating. But
mm,
with the biofield viewer, as I said, and you may have seen in some of our slides, we have a 3D version. And that's very different from the other two major filters that we have, in that you can hold a camera away from the body, but see the biofield in 3 dimensions.
mm,
That's very significant. For example, we're collaborating with a lot of skin specialists, especially in countries where they have a high degree of skin cancer, because if you look at a mole, you may or may not know whether there's a malignancy. But if you see a biofield viewer image of a mole that is malignant, it's very different from one that isn't. So I think there's a huge amount of mileage in I mean, we're very open to advances in technology so that as cameras get more sophisticated, as technology gets more widely available, we can put our system, from an old style video camera and a computer to now in people's phones. Um, but anyhow, yeah,
Yeah, it's marvelous. Thank you. No, very interesting. Thanks.
Doctor, can I just clarify for people who would like to have a go
yeah,
and
right.
who would like to maybe have their biofield measured, can you just go over again
Yeah.
the process where people can send photos?
Totally. Well, the first thing I would say is that all of the slides today had various different bits of information in there. So if someone's got the recording, they can just go forward to that slide. But if you recall, it was called Patreon. Patreon, it's a website. It's people use Patreon. Say if I'm, rebuilding a church organ and 50 people are supporting me. They all send $5 a month. It's that kind of a
Mm,
website, I think. So they end up being your patrons. Um,
yes.
so that's the site that we use. We like it because it's really just basic and it's
Mm,
simple and it allows people to access our technology, you know, on their own phones, but on a, sort of limited time period, depending on how long they want to use it for.
mm,
So
mm,
that is there. But if I think what I'm very much prepared to do and what I said earlier is if you kind of you email me, then I'll email you, the code. And my email is thornton.streeter@gmail.com. But of course, if they email you as well, Liz, that's quite all right as well, because
well,
I'm
yeah.
quite happy to give everyone who's listening to this or has left or is coming or whatever a good month-long access to the app for free so they can try it out on one condition. They really try and optimize their lighting. And there's a little video link which I'll also share so they can watch a quick 3-minute optimization video because it's really boring for them and dare I say for me if they send me a picture which is really badly lit like this with light here and shadow here that doesn't allow me to peer into the delicate flower that is the biofield.
Mm, okay, I will send all these links in
Yeah,
the email with the
yeah.
recording
I
tomorrow.
do this, I
Yeah.
do this irregularly, and hundreds of people use the Biofield Viewer for the first time through these free portals. And then
Mm,
after a month or so, they just poof, and then we encourage them to come back and do it again.
Well, thank you for your generous offer. That's
Not at
really
all. I'm having a great time.
so. Anyone else with a question? Everyone's gone quiet.
Well, that happens, it really does
Yeah.
happen. And I'm
Well,
not
there was,
trying
as I
to
say, so much information, and you covered so many things because you talked about the technology, you showed us lots of images. One thing, other thing I'd like to ask,
Mhm.
and I've been lucky enough to have a go with the technology, and you've talked me through some of the things, but just to clarify, when you see the pink color, a lot of
Yeah.
pink and darker colors, that I'm think I'm right in saying is when people have either got blockages or they're shielding,
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah,
and
yeah, thanks. I mean, I'll carry on with that because that is quite a common pattern that we see. And you also very kindly differentiated in a way that what is a blockage, what looks like a blockage, looks like a cloud of dark energy or whatever, we call shielding. And we call it shielding because we're honoring the person who's doing the blocking. They've created this cloud of candy floss in front of them for a reason. And we just honor that because we find that if I said to someone, "Oh, you've got a blockage here, you've got a block there, you've got a block there," they're like, "Oh my God, what can I do about it?" Whereas if I say you're shielding this, you're shielding that, and all you need to do is digest the issue that's making you put your shields up, And so it's an invitation for them to do something which is in their power and in their control. And that's why we use the word shielding with reference to blocked energy, and we use the word venting in relation to leaking energy, because often you'll see like a cardiovascular patient, someone who's had surgery, like a lot of heart surgery, their energy is so delicate, it can't run through the normal toroidal movement. And so it leaks onto the ground. And you can see it leaking off various points or out through their feet because, they don't want to they don't want the pressure cooker lid to blow off. So it's better that it vents away. And that process, again, is something within their control. If they're prepared to make in this case, quite substantial lifestyle changes and whatever it is to get onto an even keel, then we wouldn't see that venting. So venting and shielding are two parameters we often define in images. You're absolutely right. And they allow us to explore why an image is significant because and there are other parameters, of course. Symmetry is one that I've really focused on today, as that in a healthy person's image really looks very symmetrical. And from time to time, I've gone in and looked at biofield images and said, oh, hang on a minute, that's slightly out of symmetry. And what is it that is out of symmetry is often some of the shielding or venting. So they kind of go hand in hand. And that's why there's always this exciting opportunity to see your biofield, even if you think you're perfect, to see it and go, oh, wow, there's a little thing there and work with it towards optimization. And especially with healers, because they get it. As I said, our higher sensory perception is informed. All of our manuals are up to speed. All we've got to do is be present at the heart, riding that surfboard, and then we get
Mm.
access to all these features. It's like having one of these new cars. They don't let you do everything to start with.
Mm. Oh my goodness, I think one of the biggest messages here is that when you're informed, when you know this stuff, when you can see it, then you have the power to do something, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, and
It's really,
seeing is believing. So
yeah,
that's I mentioned that as well, and it allows you to have this kind of digital genie in your pocket who's not judgmental. You can prop him up on the windowsill or whatever it is, and take
yeah,
your picture in your birthday suit without anyone seeing, and just compare one to the other over a period of weeks. That's what I'm encouraging people to do.
yeah.
They can obviously come and see me directly, or one of my hundreds of other colleagues around the world who does this more formally in a kind of come for an hour for a clinical experience. But anyway, I'm sure everyone's starving, or at least wants a cup of tea. Crikey.
Oh, Thornton, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time and you've got such great energy, which obviously fits. Really appreciate your time. I'm sure everyone does, and I'm sure everyone is blown away by this information. Good job it's recorded. Good job people can watch back because there was so much to take in. So thank you again, Thornton.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. We've run slightly over time, so I just want to close quite quickly to let you know that I will send a recording of tonight's session out tomorrow, and I will include Thornton's email address and anything else that's relevant. Yeah, thank you again for being here. We've got another fantastic talk coming up in a month's time. Slightly different field, but we've got some brilliant speakers talking about the essence of healing. And I may join them in that as well. So I'll let you know all of what's coming up in our newsletter. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Thornton. And good night, everyone. We'll be in touch soon. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.